Chapter 1. The chilling silence of the parish. The silence hung in the air like fog. It was the kind of silence that came when something ghastly lurked just out of sight, when shadows whispered secrets and the trees seemed to lean in, eager to hear what was about to unfold. Father Brown stepped through the wrought-iron gate of St. Mary's Church in the idyllic village of Kembleford, his heart heavy with apprehension. The parish had always been a sanctuary for the faithful, and yet this morning felt different. A stillness pervaded the entire village, an unease that lay thick upon the cobblestone paths and ivy-clad walls. As he approached the entrance, he noticed an eye-catching detail, a black lace handkerchief crushed beneath the headstone of an old Victorian gravestone. There was something about the handkerchief that snagged his attention. Its fabric bore the initials E.M. in delicate embroidery, a striking contrast against its dim color. He glanced around. No one was in sight. Confused, he tucked the handkerchief into the crook of his fingers, feeling the fabric's coolness while a shiver crept up his spine. Inside the church, the quiet continued, though now mixed with the faint echo of a sorrowful melody that drifted from the choir loft. The parishioners had gathered to mourn the recent passing of Edgar Mallory, the local squire, a death that had shocked even the most stoic villagers. Father Brown had been privy to many secrets in his years as a priest, but the stories surrounding Mallory's death, spoken in hushed tones amidst flickering candlelight, unnerved him. Though the cause was said to be a heart attack, whispers hinted at foul play, and the pews felt heavy with the weight of unspoken grievances. At the front, he spotted Mrs. Agnes Pembroke, the squire's housekeeper, seated in the first row, her puffy eyes heavily shadowed. Father Brown acknowledged her with a nod, but her response was a vacant stare, as if she were already somewhere else, grasping at threads of despair. As he began the service, he couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing, one that had been gathering strength well before Edgar Mallory had taken his last breath. Once the service concluded, Father Brown quietly approached Mrs. Pembroke. "You seem troubled, Agnes," he said gently. "Is there something weighing upon your heart?" She looked up, her hands trembling ever so slightly as they rested in her lap. "It's not just his death, Father. So much has been buried in this house, and now—" Her voice faltered as she looked past him. Her gaze fell upon the figure of Mrs. Felicity Hargrove, the village's wealthiest widow, who had always maintained a frosty distance from the Mallory household ever since the scandal that had marred her own family's name. They say she had reason to visit him that night. Felicity, Father Brown mused, his mind racing. Why would she visit Edgar? Only the night before, Mrs. Pembroke whispered. Some say she came to confront him. Others think it was more than that. I can't believe she'd— Her voice trembled and faltered, but a fire of indignation flickered behind her eyes, as if she seethed with unanswered questions. Father Brown's instinct told him she was withholding information. He gently pressed, "What did they fight about, do you know?" But the mournful atmosphere was interrupted by a sudden exclamation from the back. A local farmer, Thomas Gresham, had stumbled through the door, cheeks flushed and breathless. "Father, come quickly. It's Sir Edgar. There's been an accident." Rushing outside, with a throng of curious parishioners behind him, Father Brown followed Thomas to the lush gardens bordering the manor. There, gruesome reality awaited them. Edgar Mallory lay sprawled upon the grass, a paperback novel splayed across his chest, and a thin trickle of blood glistening against the verdant blades. The sight shot through Father Brown like ice. "Get a doctor!" shouted Thomas, brimming with panic. A few villagers hastened into action, but Father Brown bent down to inspect the body closely. The title of the opened book, that very same tome he had once lent to Edgar, caught his attention. The Golden Bowl, by Henry James. The pages whispered of betrayal, secrets, and a web of lies, an eerie coincidence. Who was the last to see him alive? Father Brown murmured to himself, the gears of deduction whirring within his mind. As villagers murmured and speculated, Felicity Hargrove stepped forward with an uncharacteristic boldness, her crimson lips thinning into a line of tension. "I was meeting with Edgar, Father Brown," she declared, her voice ringing out with a commanding tone. "He refused to part with something that rightfully belongs to me. We argued. I warned him he was making an enemy." Agnes Pembroke stiffened beside Father Brown. "But he didn't have the thing you were looking for, did he? You wouldn't hurt him over a mere trinket." Her words fired like arrows, and for the first time, Felicity's composure wavered. "Trinket? That's rich coming from you." Felicity snapped back, an edge creeping into her voice. "You had your own motives, Agnes. Always the dutiful servant, but perhaps too devoted to the squire himself." The tension escalated, drawing gasps and murmurs from those nearby. Father Brown felt the air thicken as he considered their words carefully, piecing together the intricate web of motives lurking beneath the surface. But as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows that tangled through the garden, he spied something that would change everything. Just beyond the blood, hidden in the grass, was a pair of golden cufflinks, elaborate and peculiar. They glinted in the fading light, unmistakably belonging to a gentleman of high status, yet distinctly out of place. As a dreadful stillness fell over the gathering, Father Brown bent down, picking up the cufflinks with a firm grip. "It appears, my friends, that our tragedy was no mere accident after all." With that, the puzzle of the chilling silence began to unravel, and the air thickened with both dread and anticipation, leaving them all waiting for the next clue in this web of shadows. Chapter 2. A Missing Confession. The mist hung low across the village of Kembleford, like a thick shroud, muffling the early morning sounds of clucking hens and rustling leaves. It was a day that seemed unearthed from time, where secrets lingered just beneath the surface. Father Brown had awoken early, a sense of unease prickling at his conscience. Something in the air hinted at a mystery waiting to unfold. He made his way to St. Mary's Church, the ancient stone edifice standing solemn against the grey sky, its weathered spire piercing the fog. The churchyard reeked of damp earth and age, where headstones leaned at angles, echoing untold stories. As he approached the oak door, however, it swung open with an ominous creak. Father Brown stopped, his heart sinking. It was not the wind that had moved it. Inside, the flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows along the cold stone walls. There, on the altar, lay a leather-bound book, the parish's confession ledger, open as if left in haste, and, next to it, a note, paper frayed and ink splattered. "Father, forgive me," it read. "I can no longer bear it." The confession was signed, but the signature was either smudged or indecipherable, a ghost of the writer's intent. There was no mistaking that something valuable had vanished. Not just the book, but the soul of the parish itself. Father Brown's brow furrowed as he picked up the ledger and examined it carefully. This was no ordinary writing. It bore the cursive finesse of someone well-educated, layered with desperation. After scanning through the pages, he grimaced. The last recorded confession dated back to days prior, None since. Graham Withers, the village lawyer, intruded suddenly, a harried figure with spectacles perched precariously on his nose. "Father, have you seen the ledger?" His voice cracked, a harbinger of deeper troubles. "It appears to be right here," Brown said, holding it aloft. "But you seem more concerned than the contents." "Withers," the lawyer spluttered, grasping his lapels. "You must understand. Last night during the storm, Miss Heather Fielding came to see me. She was found dead, less than an hour afterward." The weight of the words hung in the air. "Miss Fielding, the school teacher?" "Indeed. The whole village is in an uproar. You must have noticed." The corners of Withers' mouth trembled. "And now, with her purged sins missing, it will create chaos. If anyone knew—" "Come, my friend." Father Brown motioned him toward a wooden bench. "You must explain everything clearly and without haste." Withers sat, wringing his hands. "It was a private meeting. She confessed to me to putting an end to someone who had harmed her brother. I advised her to go to the authorities, but she feared they would not believe her. Just yesterday, she discovered he had been wandering among us under the guise of being a reformed man. She had taken matters into her own hands." "So you believe she killed him?" Father Brown probed, observing the subtle changes in the lawyer's demeanor. "No, I never said that. And now, if the confession is misleading, Father, she left in utter distress. I thought she'd gone home, but oh my God! What if she was caught?" A flicker of realization crossed Brown's mind. Caught. The word resonated, as it often did in matters of guilt and fear. "You said she met you under the cover of night. Do you recall anything peculiar about your visit? Any details that linger?" Withers nodded, his brow knitted. "She arrived late, and in haste. She was nervous, but there was something in her eyes. The moment she mentioned her brother, an awakening of something dark, like a secret long buried. I had the notion she was not just speaking about her family." "What was her brother's name?" "Peter Fielding, a man once thought a rogue, imprisoned several years before. They never found the body after the escape, but Miss Fielding would not let go of the past." Thinking of Peter Fielding sent tumultuous thoughts spiraling in Father Brown's mind, a confession involving blood and despair. It was dark territory, the kind that churned emotions and obscured truth. He rose, tapping the ledger lightly in contemplation. "We must find her body, and what you have shared will be crucial. Gather the constable and join me at the last location you know she visited." "No, no, Father, I cannot." Withers blanched, perspiration dotting his forehead. "My name, my position. If this scandal were to surface, my reputation would—" "Your fear is precisely why we must act." Father Brown's voice remained steady, resolute. "This is not just about you. Miss Fielding deserves justice. If an innocent has been wronged, then the truth must see the light of day, even if it tarnishes a few reputations." The parlous nature of truth weighed heavily upon Withers. His eyes slowly shifted from dread to resolve. "I will come. For her." As they made their way to the village square, rumors swirled through the streets, like autumn leaves blown by the wind. Who had killed the teacher? Or had she met her demise at the hand of the banished brother? They could feel the cold air congealing with suspicion, the fog thickening around them. Father Brown suddenly halted, glancing toward the gnarled oak tree standing sentinel at the village edge. Litter beneath its branches caught his eye. Dismissing the ongoing murmurs, he approached and knelt down. There, within the tangles of foliage, was a piece of torn fabric that appeared to match the dress Heather had worn in the village just days before. Withers gasped, fear creeping back as he leaned closer. What does it mean? Before Father Brown could reply, a distant scream fractured the silence. It echoed from the direction of the river, wrenching at the heart, a cry of distress or revelation. It cannot be, Withers muttered, knowing well that both their fates entwined within the layers of these darkened confessions. Stay here, Father Brown urged, already setting off. The path felt alive and suffocating, every heartbeat pounding against the silence that shrouded the village. Deep within the fog, answers lay buried alongside unanswered questions, waiting to be uncovered. But what else would be lost in doing so? With every step, Father Brown could feel the looming shadow of revelations drawing nearer, a sensation of something darker than he dared to grasp, tangling at the edges of his resolve. As he reached the sloping banks of the river, he could sense something was amiss. The cold air bore witness to humanity's hidden fears, and he braced himself for whatever reality awaited. The whispers of confessions trailed behind him, like smoke in the fog, teetering on the edge of discovery, secrets unspooling in the murkiness of Kembleford's heart. What awaited him was perhaps more than he could bear, and with bated breath he approached the edge. Chapter 3. The Unexpected Visitor. A faint click echoed against the ancient oakwood doors of St. Mary's Church, its sound tinged with uncharacteristic urgency for a humid September morning. Father Brown, engrossed in his musings on the morality of man, looked up from where he stood near the flickering candle of the altar. The air was thick with incense and something else, disquiet. Before he could take a step towards the sound, the doors swung open. A figure burst into the church, silhouetted against the bleary morning light. It was Miss Clara Havisham, the local schoolteacher, her usually composed manner now erratic. Her skirts swished as she hurried forward, an urgency about her that rendered breathless the air around her. "Father, it's dreadful," she exclaimed, her arms trembling. "It's Mrs. Hawthorne. Something terrible has happened." Father Brown's brow furrowed. "What's happened, Miss Havisham?" She is lying in the garden. There's blood everywhere." Miss Havisham clutched the pew for support, her face pale as bleached linen. Father Brown felt a chill crawl up his spine. Renowned for the flow of the village's affairs, the shocking state of Mrs. Hawthorne, the elderly widow of the late Sir Archibald Hawthorne, stirred a precarious sense of dread. "Is she alive?" he asked, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Miss Havisham shook her head in horror. "No, Father. She is dead." The churchyard path led them into a serpentine maze of tranquil tombstones and open grass. As they reached the Hawthorne residence, an imposing manor draped in wisps of mist, whispers from gathered villagers tightened the atmosphere around them. They parted at Father Brown's approach, curiosity tinged with apprehension lurking in their eyes. Mrs. Hawthorne's garden was a display of chaotic beauty. Petals from untamed roses formed a crimson carpet, framing the motionless form of the widow on the ornate stone bench, her sweet floral dress marred by dark, spreading stains. Leaning in, Father Brown noted the ruffled pages of the book that rested on her lap, an open letter, its ink fresh yet disturbing. "Is that what she was reading before?" Miss Havisham broke off, swallowing hard. Father Brown examined the letter, his dark eyes keen. The hurried scratch of ink seemed to betray Mrs. Hawthorne's sense of dread, a chilling final sentiment drawn onto the page. To discover, he muttered, deciphering the hastily written scrawl. It was addressed to someone specific, someone she feared, and yet it remains unsigned. Who would wish her harm? Miss Havisham pressed, her eyes darting to the whispering villagers. Everyone loved Mrs. Hawthorne. Did they? Father Brown asked, thoughtfully. Love can often disguise darker shades of envy and ambition, my dear Clara. As the commotion of the gathering crowd swelled, a sudden hush interrupted the agitated murmurs, breaking across the coil of tension with the unmistakable clatter of a coach's wheels against cobblestone. Father Brown's keen deductive instincts pricked, sensing each tiny change in the atmosphere. A dark, velvet-lined carriage rolled into view, as if pulling its secrets along with it. Its well-dressed occupant alighted with a precision that spoke of nobility. Baron Levison, a distant cousin to the Hawthorns. The air thickened with his arrival, casting eyes upon him filled with envy and speculation. Father Brown, he called, his voice a genteel facade, hiding whatever tumult allowed him to come forth into the chaos. I've heard dreadful news. Is it true? The poor lady is dead. Father Brown's observation was blunt, yet compassionate. How ghastly indeed. The inevitable fall of all splendid fortunes. Did she not always what? Father Brown pressed, noticing an edge to the Baron's formality as he stammered, betraying an anxiety that lay beneath his careful demeanor. The estate. It was said that she wished to leave it to a tall charity rather than to the family. The Baron's tone dripped with feigned sorrow, a hint of self-interest misleadingly masked beneath his sorrowful gaze. But isn't it curious? Father Brown interjected, a spark igniting his deductive prowess. The people around you respected Mrs. Hawthorne dearly, yet today they whisper of disputes between her and the family. Disputes over inheritance, I hear. The Baron stiffened, darting a glance back towards the villagers who continued to gather, listening intently. I hardly think those matters bear relevance to her current. He wide-eyed, catching his judgment. Yet they do, Father Brown said. Her death raises the question of motivations. Something, perhaps, you like to keep concealed, my lord. A sudden shout from Miss Havisham broke through the tension. Look, she exclaimed, pointing toward the opulent silver handle of Mrs. Hawthorne's beloved walking stick, lying oddly on the ground nearby, crooked and untethered. It was a detail dismissed by others fleeing urgency, but Father Brown felt a jolt of realization. The carriage driver, an unfamiliar face, openly gazed at them, a flicker of dread flickering across his brow. The tousling mist around them began to disperse, revealing a truth obscured by layers of deception. Clara, do you see the driver? Father Brown asked, intrigue growing sharper. Was he with Mrs. Hawthorne, or the Baron? He wasn't here earlier. I remember a different driver. That man seemed unwelcome, she whispered, her eyes wide. Yes, Father Brown said, a realization dawning. And which was it I saw in the hall on that fateful day? A letter, not for all to see, signed, your friend, flattened under the official silence of a promise unkept. This driver perhaps carries with him much more than he appears. His presence stands like a shadow over a guilt-ridden extension of those I once deemed innocent. As the church bell tolled ominously in the distance, a sense of impending danger loomed. Father Brown, steadying himself against the knowledge of what lay ahead, felt a potent rush of urgency coursing through him. Somewhere, wrapped in veils of deceit, lay a motive which cried for exposure, a murderer hidden among them like the creeping fog. Father Brown turned to Clara, quickly ushering her aside. "We must find answers before the web spun around us tangled tighter. Now, with what I've seen, I fear the visitor may return." The last echoes of the bell resounded through the valley like a drum roll heralding disaster, and Father Brown felt the weight of the shadows drawing nearer. Chapter 4. The Secret Will. The heavy oak door creaked ominously as Father Brown entered the dim study of the late Edmund Blakeney, a formidable local magnate whose sudden death had left Kembleford in a state of near uproar. Dark wood paneling absorbed the scant light from a solitary window, and the air was thick with the scent of aged paper mingled with dust. A fire flickered in the hearth, casting elongated shadows that danced across the book-laden shelves, creating a haunting atmosphere that felt alive with unspoken secrets. "To think it would come to this," murmured Mrs. Merrick, the old housekeeper, her visage a mask of grief and bewilderment. "Such a fine man, yet he died so suddenly, just hours after announcing a new will." Father Brown observed her, her trembling hands clasped tightly in front of her, the weariness in her eyes indicating nights spent in deep thought rather than restful dreams. "He had much on his mind, I sense. This new will, what do you know about it?" "It was never seen, I assure you," she replied sharply, her voice trembling. "Only the fluttering whispers of the household. He mentioned it the night before. Some guests had arrived unexpectedly. A tremor of anxiety ran through her. But he took it to his study, and it was never mentioned again." "Guests?" Father Brown inquired, his eyes narrowing. "Might I ask who?" "Sir Harcourt Graves, the doctor, and his wife. Oh, and the photographer, Mr. Sedgwick. They were all here to discuss business, as Mr. Blakeney had a stake in the gallery." There was a hushed suspicion in her voice, laced with remorse. "But I know not what transpired after I went to bed." Father Brown turned, caught in the turmoil of his thoughts. There were layers yet to unfold, intricacies that transcended mere death. He leaned closer to Mrs. Merrick, intrigue sparking in his designer brow. "But the will, Mrs. Merrick, did anyone seem particularly restless or distressed during their visit?" She nodded slowly. "Mr. Sedgwick, he seemed anxious, perhaps, but why I wouldn't know. Flustered." A flicker of unease enveloped the room, prompting Father Brown to take his leave. The shadows of the manor curled around him, muting the outside world as he stepped through the threshold into the misty autumn afternoon. Water droplets clung to the leaves, painting the village with a surreal sheen as he navigated the cobbled streets towards the gallery, where the men had conducted their discussions. Inside the gallery, sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the vibrant canvases, each brushstroke telling vivid stories of color and light. The cheerful atmosphere struck him as jarring amidst the clouds of uncertainty enveloping Kembleford. Mr. Sedgwick was currently in the back room, adjusting his camera, an ironic twist considering the sudden death of the man whose life he had sought to capture. "Ah, Father Brown," Sedgwick greeted, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "What brings you here on such a dreary day?" "It's the cloud of grief that swept across us all, I suspect," Father Brown replied, observing the nervous glint in Sedgwick's eye. "I wanted to speak with you about Mr. Blakeney." "Such a tragic end," Sedgwick murmured, adjusting his spectacles. "But nothing to see here. Merely the whims of fate." "There was talk of a new will," Father Brown pressed, his tone even. "You were in his company the night before he died, were you not?" "Indeed, Sedgwick said, but his voice faltered. Yet, I can hardly see how that— Do you not find it curious that a man would announce such news and shortly after depart from this world? Father Brown continued, leaning in slightly. It raises more questions than it answers. The photographer's face paled, revealing the hint of a hidden anxiety simmering beneath his exterior. I simply did my work, Father. I documented his wishes in terms of art. Nothing more. And yet you seem somewhat perturbed, Father Brown observed, keenly. Might you have seen or heard something? Perhaps a quarrel in the study? For a moment, tension crackled in the air, taut as a drawstring. No, Father. I cannot speak for what passed between men of business, he snapped, the anger barely concealing his apprehension. All I know is that Mr. Blakeney was preoccupied with some matters, ill fortune, one could say. Before Father Brown could respond, Sedgwick excused himself, relief flooding his voice. Forgive me, Father, but I must tend to my work. Left alone in the gallery, Father Brown surveyed the area, his mind racing with possibilities. A secret will, a photograph. What was the connection? His intuition wrestled through the details, yet the pace of his thoughts was interrupted by a startling sight. Huddled near a painting of a desolate seascape, tucked under a table, was a folded piece of paper peeking out, battered and yellowed by time. Carefully and quietly, he drew it toward him. His eyes widened at the scrawled lines of strong, deliberate handwriting. The familiar looping strokes confirmed it without doubt. It belonged to Edmund Blakeney. Reading aloud to himself, he pieced together sections about his intended to give his estate to support local charities, a noble cause, and yet a second layer revealed something far more confounding. Upon my death, the creditors must remain unsatisfied. I leave. Father Brown choked on the words, the implications swirling in his mind. I leave. Behind. An icy tendril of understanding traced its way down Father Brown's spine. This was far more than mere inheritance. It was a desperate act, layered with guilt and echoes of betrayal, sending ripples that could engulf all those involved. But just as the pieces began to fit together, a loud crash erupted from the front of the gallery, pulling Father Brown from his thoughts. He rushed out, heart racing, to find Mrs. Merrick's frail form sprawled on the floor, a bright crimson pool seeping from a wound on her temple. In her grasp was a crumpled piece of parchment that was now fluttering into the air, but the secrets it could unveil were now lost to the shadows of an aged gallery. Mrs. Merrick, Father Brown shouted, the urgency coiling within him. Was this an accident, or a grim consequence of uncovering truths meant to stay hidden? As he knelt beside her, dread flooded over him, for he understood that the answers lay just beyond reach, obscured by secrets swirling like the mist that crept through the village of Kembleford. He could sense the darkening shapes closing in, and he grasped one pivotal truth. The chase had only just begun. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Night. The earliest hours of dawn cast a murky veil over Kembleford, the mist coiling around the ancient stones of St. Mary's Church, and weaving itself through the village like a sly spectre. It was just past 5, when Father Brown, his brow knitted, stood at the creaking oak door of the vestry, rummaging through the papers of the late Mr. Pickworth, the village's long-serving benefactor. Footsteps echoed in the dim recesses behind him, accompanied by a hurried gasp. "Father, you must come quickly." It was Mrs. Dobbins, the village innkeeper, her cheeks damp with fear. "It's Mr. Pickworth. They found him in the graveyard." Without a moment's hesitation, Father Brown followed Mrs. Dobbins into the chilling twilight. The damp air nipped at his collar as they hurried towards the churchyard, where a throng of villagers gathered like moths to an ominous flame. Torches flickered with erratic flames, revealing a taut circle of concerned faces and hushed whispers. At the center lay the wizened form of Mr. Pickworth, his plaid scarf askew, the earth beneath him mottled with clods of disturbed soil. "He looks remarkably peaceful," Father Brown murmured, kneeling by the stalwart figure. But even as he spoke, the hardening chill in the air whispered a different tale. There was no natural reason for the death of a man who had moments earlier been an indomitable titan of the village. "Peaceful?" Mrs. Dobbins echoed incredulously. "He's dead, Father." A few heartbeats passed before Father Brown lifted his gaze to the gathering, scrutinizing each face. "Had he attended night services recently?" he asked, holding onto Mrs. Dobbins's arm as he rose. The question drew puzzled glances, but was followed by the eager voice of Constable Oldham, who had just arrived on the scene. "No services for days, ever since the reports about his will surfaced," Oldham declared, puffing up his chest to establish his authority. "They say it's worth a fortune, and now, with him dead. No suspects yet, but given how many mouths could want him gone, we should think on it." Mystified murmurs swept through the crowd, warming the tension with a sinister undertow. Father Brown considered Oldham's words, skeptical of their intensity. "More than that, Constable," Father Brown replied, fixing his gaze on the grave near which Mr. Pickworth lay. "Do you not find it curious that he lies exactly where the gravestone of Lady Eliza Corbett rests?" The villagers exchanged glances. Lady Eliza had perished over a decade ago, and her legacy was intertwined with Pickworth's fortune, having served as one of his most adored benefactors. "I thought it a respectable place," said Mrs. Dobbins, clutching her shawl tighter. "He adored her memory." "Respect, or perhaps reverence, can take many forms," Father Brown said, tilting his head slightly as he examined the surroundings. "But even the best of influences can foster envy and avarice." His eyes glinted with the light of perceivable truths, striking a spark of fear into the hearts of silent onlookers. "And which of those envious souls makes up our merry band?" Constable Oldham grumbled, sharpening his focus on the villagers, his face taut with frustration. "Do we begin making accusations blindly?" "Accusations, no, but gather knowledge we must," Father Brown retorted. "The dusk does not only cloak the dead, it shrouds motives within shadow." As twilight descended, they settled into the inn, the flickering fire, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Around a hearth, Father Brown and the villagers discussed Mr. Pickworth's irregularities. Mrs. Dobbins leaned in closer. Just before his death, he had called upon the Lambridge brothers to disengage his personal affairs. They were about to leave for London. Did he suspect danger? "Where were the Lambridge brothers last night?" Father Brown asked, his heart sensing an unspoken truth. It was often money that birthed shadows of greed and envy. "Gambling, they say," Oldham said, scratching his head. "And yet they would stand to lose considerably if Mr. Pickworth changed his will." The embers crackled as conversations swirled, but the father remained stoic, pondering the shifting patterns around him. Somewhere in this labyrinth of excitement lay the thread that would unravel it all. Just then, a voice rose from the dim shadows, a figure creeping toward the inn, hood drawn tight. Upon closer view, it was Euphemia Hargrove, a resilient matriarch known for her fierce disposition, swathed in layers of wool. "Father, forgive the intrusion, but I bear a dreadful weight," she cried, her voice piercing through the clamor. "What think you, Euphemia? Speak." Father Brown beckoned. "I overheard the Lambridge brothers arguing," she confessed, her breath quickening like the pulse of a hunted animal. "They spoke of Mr. Pickworth's grave, and something about the details. If the inheritance were to change—" "Details of the will are critical, then," Father Brown interrupted, his mind weaving connections. "They could be the key." The villagers leaned closer, wrapped in rapt attention. Euphemia hesitated, her hands trembling. "Yes, but Father—" Before she could finish, a sudden crash resonated outside, followed by frantic shouts. The dark silhouette of a man staggered towards them, at the inn's threshold, a broken lantern in hand. He was pale and wild-eyed, his hair disheveled as if he'd just emerged from a nightmare, but grasping tightly to a piece of paper. "Father, you must see," he gasped, nearly tumbling into the room. The firelight flickered against a glistening edge of the paper as Father Brown approached. The atmosphere shifted, laden with a gravitas that heralded the unveiling of secrets hidden amidst the shadows. The something tangible, the clue toward the friction of greed, desire, and death, waited within that tremulous hand, and with that, the curtain fell across the dim light of the living room, leaving only the echo of questions that begged to be answered. What lay upon that paper would either unravel the mystery of Mr. Pickworth's demise or plunge Kembleford deeper into darkness. Father Brown held his breath, poised at the edge of revelation. Chapter 6. The letter that changed everything. The air in Kembleford was thick with the stillness that often heralded something amiss. As Father Brown stepped through the misty churchyard, its ancient tombstones loomed like sentinels, guarding long-buried secrets. The cold dampness seeped into his bones. He shivered not from the chill, but from the sense of foreboding that encircled him. He had just received word of a shocking discovery at the estate of the late Sir Reginald Baxton, which loomed, inadequate and shadowy, at the end of Baxton Lane. Entering the manor was a journey back in time, where the potent scent of wax polish and the slight creak of floorboards accompanied him. Here, time had folded in on itself, and everything, from the faded portraits with their stoic gazes to the grand staircase spiraling upward, spoke of unspeakable histories hidden behind closed doors. Father Brown wasn't alone in his investigation. Lady Veronica Baxton, Sir Reginald's widow, awaited him in the drawing room. She wore an expression built from both grief and something more cunning, a chiseled mask that could have been carved from the very marble of the fireplace. "Father," she beckoned, her voice a whisper, laced with an edge. "You must see this." Cautiously, Father Brown approached as she handed him a letter, its edges frayed and browning with age. The hasty scrawl on the parchment immediately caught his eye. The signature belonged to Sir Reginald himself, but the content revealed something darker than mere family correspondence. "My beloved Veronica," it read, "if by the time you read this letter I have departed this world, know that it was not by fate alone. I have seen the depths of betrayal that you harbor." His brow furrowed as he realized the implications of the words. Betrayal. It echoed ominously through the high-arched windows. The letter bore the marks of distress. The ink splotched as if penned in haste, an urgency that seemed to leap off the page. "Why did you not reveal this before?" Father Brown inquired, observing the woman's expression, metamorphosed into a blend of sorrow and indignation. "I never knew it existed until yesterday," she replied, her eyes rimming with tears, yet withholding their descent. It was tucked behind a family portrait. In that moment, a fleeting sense of pity washed over Father Brown for her plight. But the knowledge was too jarring. A tangle of emotions, treachery, and family ties that threatened to drown her. "And you believe this betrayal is linked to his death?" he pressed, his voice grave. "Only if someone meant him harm," she said quietly, her eyes narrowing as she bit back grief. He had made new enemies in the parish. There had been whispers and shadows at the last council meeting. Father Brown surveyed her. She spoke of enemies with a passivity rooted in poise, but danced around the truth like a flame testing the wind. He felt a pull to unravel the knot of her hidden motives. What were the whispers? "They say Sir Reginald was to change his will due to a matter of perspective on the estate. He believed it could do more for the village than simply line the pockets of his family," she explained, with a flicker of resentment crossing her features. "Some were not pleased, you see, especially Mr. Fletcher." The name stirred something in Father Brown's memory. He had heard of Emerson Fletcher, a sharp-tongued local who had opposed Sir Reginald at every turn. Fletcher had undeniably been in favour of maintaining the status quo, and anything that rocked the boat would surely have raised his ire. "So you believe Fletcher had motive?" Father Brown narrowed his eyes. "Among others, yes." Lady Veronica stepped back, her own mind entangled in what betrayals might exist. "Perhaps the letter came to show me to whom I should be wary." Father Brown turned to the window, contemplating the quiet village stretching below like a patchwork quilt, unaware of the unraveling threads that threaded through its fabric. Revisiting the letter, he felt a prick of realization as he considered the state of the ink and how many drafts it had gone through. "Did you recognize the handwriting, Lady Veronica?" For a moment she struggled to maintain her stoic air. "He had a distinct hand, but the agitation in this letter feels different, as if written in undue haste." Father Brown nodded, reaching for the edges of understanding. "Yes, indeed. But what is it you wish to share with me directly?" he prodded, searching her face for the flicker of truth amid the tapestry of lies. Her expression faltered, and for just an instant, Father Brown glimpsed vulnerability beneath her regal facade. "I wish to clear my husband's name. There may have been lovers before him, but I am convinced his death came from those who felt threatened by his vision for our future. The letter could bring ruin or vindication." Just then, a sharp knock startled them both, echoing from the hallway. A figure stepped inside. None other than Emerson Fletcher himself, his demeanor taut, eyes glinting like a hawk as he surveyed the scene with undisguised interest. "Quite a gathering, is it not?" he said, tone dripping with sarcasm. "What's the matter, Lady Baxton? Is the house back in mourning?" The tension was palpable as Father Brown's muscles coiled, the atmosphere suffused with animosity. This encounter went beyond mere rivalry. It struck at the heart of loyalty and betrayal. "Perhaps we have much to discuss, Mr. Fletcher," Father Brown said diplomatically, yet with a sharpness to his voice that warned of the dark waters they were navigating. Drawing nearer, Fletcher's gaze flickered towards the letter Father Brown held. What a peculiar piece of correspondence, no? One might even suggest it was crafted to throw suspicion away from those who truly deserve it, he stated smoothly, a wolfish smile creeping along his lips. Father Brown sensed a revelation lurked within Fletcher's words, the ire of a defensive man unwilling to let a narrative shift. In that instant, he realized this fray was far from resolved. Just as light illuminates the dark, so does truth unveil the hidden. Father Brown intoned, the storm brewing behind his calm exterior. And within the depths of that letter, he perceived a clue that would change everything. A clue embedded deeper than ink, entwined with the hearts of those who once loved and lost. As cadence of the world around them began to settle into an uncanny quiet, Father Brown's mind raced with new revelations. The very air bristled with anticipation, yet sinister intentions lurked just beneath the surface. He knew the only way to untangle this web was to look beyond the shadows of loyalty, betrayal, and bold faces, and into the fragile heart of a mystery much larger than any man. With the mystery unfurling like a gathering storm, the next move was critical. Desperation hung thick, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would unravel them all. But Father Brown wouldn't stand by, not whilst the truth lay there, waiting to be uncovered. Deep down, he felt an urgency, an imperceptible shift that promised dark revelations yet to come. Chapter 7. A Hidden Room. The chill of morning wrapped itself around the village of Kembleford like a shroud, the mist curling above the cobblestones leading towards St. Mary's Church. Kneeling in prayer, Father Brown felt the unease that foul weather brings. Something unsettling lingered in the air. As he rose and ambled toward the side door, a sharp clamor broke the silence. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the muted morning. Quickly the priest stepped outside, his concerns only deepening when he saw Mrs. Pritchard standing outside her grandfather's house, her face as pale as the fog that enveloped them. "Father," she cried, her voice trembling. "Please, you must come. It's terrible." The elderly widow wrung her hands, directing Father Brown's attention to the jagged shards of glass littering the smooth stone pathway. Just beyond, inside the manor, a shadow flickered against the drawing-room window. The old Pritchard estate had always been a place of whispers and stories, especially since the mysterious death of Arthur Pritchard, the last of the line. "It's Simon. He's been injured," she gasped, air burning as she spoke. Father Brown hurried inside, the wooden floorboards creaking underfoot. The manor was a relic of history and secrets, its dark corners heavy with silence. As he entered the drawing-room, the air thickened with the scent of spilled port. There was Simon Pritchard, sprawled on the couch, clutching his left arm, where crimson stains spread rapidly. "Simon," Father Brown said evenly, kneeling by his side. "What happened?" "It was a mistake. Oh, Father, I thought I saw someone." Simon coughed, trying to gather himself. "Then I stumbled into the glass cabinet. I slipped just as I reached for the hidden compartment." "Hidden compartment?" Father Brown asked, his interest piqued. He glanced around the room, searching for clues in the disorderly space. "I thought we were safe, but she came back," Simon gasped. His eyes darted, filled with fear. "You must understand, Father. She knows what we found. It's why it was hidden." "Who knows? And what was it that was hidden?" Simon's eyes softened, anguished, remembering his sister, Victoria. She wouldn't have understood. No one would. Father Brown remained silent, observing closely. Simon's gaze was distant, fraught with grief, but there was something else, an undercurrent of guilt. Was Simon's injury truly accidental, or the consequence of something darker biting at him? "Simon," Father Brown pressed, "was it Victoria? Is she back?" "No, no, she's gone." The words were frantic. "But the letters, they were locked away in the hidden room, Father. They say everything. About the family, about her death." "Where is this hidden room?" "I don't know. I found the passage behind the bookcase, but the door won't open. As Simon winced in pain, Father Brown's eyes roamed the elegantly furnished room, settling on a large oak bookcase beside the fireplace. The dust gleamed softly in the neon twilight bursting through grimy windows. Somewhere within those stacks of old novels lay secrets more weighty than even the finest leather-bound tome. "I can help you," Father Brown assured him, rising to investigate further. "We must find this hidden room." Eyes widening, Mrs. Pritchard shifted nervously at the doorframe, her expression a mask of concern. "What do you mean, Father? Is Simon in danger?" "Not danger from anyone but himself," Father Brown replied, his tone gentle, yet firm. "This whole family has too many spectres haunting its halls." The priest approached the bookcase, tracing the spines with a cautious finger. Few were of any real importance. He gently pulled a thick old volume on local history, but it skidded right back into place. Oddly, while the others moved freely, a slight resistance met his push on a particularly worn copy of The Odyssey. "Mrs. Pritchard," he beckoned without taking his eyes off the shelf, "could you help me find a sudden release?" With hesitant hands, she joined him, and together they adjusted the old tome. Suddenly, a faint muffled click echoed through the air, and the bookcase rattled. The distinct scent of aged wood met Father Brown's nostrils as a crevice appeared within the bookcase, spilling shadows into the room. Just as the crack widened, a figure leaped back, disturbing the dust, their features barely visible in the dim light. "What are you doing?" hissed a voice, sharp as a thistle. "Victoria," Simon mumbled, horrified recognition staining his voice. Father Brown halted, his heart racing. "Who are you?" he called out, squinting as he strained to see deeper into the recesses. The room beyond was swallowed in darkness, with nothing but old wood beams protruding ominously. "You should not have come here," the voice warned, quivering with fervor. Stepping back, a shadow clutched something that caught the light, a dagger glimmering with dark intent. Father Brown's mind whirled, analyzing the scene before him. Simon's fear, Mrs. Pritchard's unease. What festering secret could lie behind the door of that hidden room? And above all was an unanswered question that gnawed. Why would Simon lie? "Run, Father! She doesn't know what she's doing!" Simon cried out, his panic raw. But Father Brown stayed rooted where he stood. He had the faintest sense that the answer to this mystery was lurking within that darkened recess, the key to unraveling his village's tangled web of secrets. As the shadow stepped into view, the familiarity struck Father Brown deep inside. It was Victoria, or was it merely a spectre of her former self? But it wasn't her features that vivid till now that gripped him. It was the glint of something far more profound in her eye, as if she were a silent guardian of that truthful chaos. "Leave, priest," she warned again, more fiercely this time. "You have no right here." This ominous proclamation lingered in the air like storm clouds gathering for a tempest, leaving Father Brown with the urgent pulse of needing to understand, to confront whatever lay behind the dagger and the darkness. With trepidation edging into his resolve, he mustered the courage of conviction that all would be revealed, and they would confront the truth that had taken so many from Kembleford. But first, he needed to step into the hidden room. As the tension thickened, Father Brown positioned himself against the threshold, the dagger still poised, his breath caught against the imminent reckoning. The shadow of secrets long imagined awaited, and Father Brown could do nothing else but delve into the heart of it all. Chapter 8. The Deceived Confidant. A chilling wind swept through the quiet village of Kembleford, stirring the fallen leaves that littered the cobbled pathway leading to St. Barnabas Church. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a fitting prelude to what was about to unfold. Father Brown had just stepped inside the ivy-clad structure when a muffled cry echoed through the hallowed halls, pulling his attention towards the vestry. He pushed the door open hesitantly, finding Lady Agatha Merriweather, an elderly parishioner known for her sharp tongue and sharper wit, collapsed on the wooden floor, a crumpled letter clutched in her trembling hands. Her pale face glistened with perspiration, and her eyes were wide with terror. "Father, it's terrible," she gasped, her voice punctuated by a fit of coughing. "I've just discovered—" "What is it, my lady?" he asked, kneeling beside her, noting the ink stains on her fingers and the gnawing anxiety in her gaze. "The letter reveals secrets, dark secrets about Mr. Lancelot. You must come quickly. He's in danger." Her voice quaked like the flickering candles around them, and Father Brown felt a deep inkling that this was another strand in the web of complications that had settled over the village of Kembleford since the murder of Lady Marjorie. Father Brown supported Lady Agatha as they hurriedly made their way outside, where a thin drizzle began to fall, mingling with the dismal fog that veiled the manor houses in the distance. "A letter, you say? From whom?" he asked, maintaining his composure despite the urgency of the situation. "I don't know. It was anonymous, but it spoke of betrayal, of a confidant deceived," she replied breathlessly. "Mr. Lancelot must be warned." Lancelot Fairchild, the effervescent vicar of St. Barnabas, had recently become embroiled in all manner of village gossip. Whispers suggesting both scandalous love affairs and dark rivalries were now a staple of conversation in the local tavern. Dozens of unanswered questions swirled like leaves tossed in a tempest. Why would anyone want to harm a man of the cloth, and who among them held such animosity sufficient to pen an anonymous letter? "Let us go directly to him then," Father Brown said, setting a brisk pace towards the vicarage. The rain intensified, and he could hear the distant toll of the church bell, calling the faithful to evening prayer, though the streets remained eerily devoid of life. Upon arriving at the vicarage, they found the door ajar. Father Brown pushed it open cautiously, revealing a cluttered study full of books and papers strewn haphazardly across the draped oak desk. "Lancelot," he called out, receiving only the echo of his own words in response. Worry creased Lady Agatha's brow as she gazed around the room, her fingers fidgeting with the locket around her neck. "He must be here. He can't be far." Father Brown moved toward the desk, noticing a small journal half hidden beneath a pile of correspondence. He picked it up carefully and flipped through the pages. The rhythmic slant of Lancelot's handwriting held the weight of confessions and secrets, the frustrations of a man longing for solace amid turmoil. Much of it concerned the rivalry with Lady Marjorie and hinted at a deeper connection with her demise. Suddenly, Lady Agatha gasped, pointing to the wall where a large portrait of Lady Marjorie hung, its vibrant colors dulled by shadows. "Look there," she cried. A loose panel beneath the portrait caught Father Brown's keen eye. He approached, his heart racing as he pulled at the edge. With a soft creak, it yielded to his touch, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small wooden box. "Father, don't," Lady Agatha warned, concern etched on her face, but curiosity outweighed caution. He opened the box to find a collection of small, intricately carved tokens. One, in particular, bore a most unusual symbol, an intertwined serpent and quill. "What is it?" Lady Agatha asked, dread flickering in her tone. "I believe these are tokens of loyalty, or perhaps betrayal," Father Brown murmured, recalling a passage he had recently come across in Lancelot's notes. The serpent represents concealment, while the quill signifies declaration, making public that which is hidden. He recalled a recent drunken ramble of Lancelot's asserting that one must guard their heart against the very acquaintances sworn to protect it. The ticking clock seemed louder, announcing an ominous hour as realization formed a knot in Father Brown's stomach. "Lady Agatha, if Mr. Lancelot is indeed in danger, we must heed this warning." "I knew it. There's someone who has betrayed him, someone he trusts." As they reached the door, a loud noise erupted from the study next door, a crash, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps retreating. Father Brown motioned for silence, and they edged towards the door just as it burst open. The figure framed in the doorway was cloaked and hurried, glancing back over his shoulder. "Stop!" Father Brown commanded, but the figure vanished into the dark, rain-soaked night. "Who was that?" Lady Agatha whispered, her voice trembling. The priest felt the pulse of the mystery quicken, a tapestry of secrets woven tighter. "I have found more than I ever expected, and yet the key eludes me. The danger is palpable. We have to find Lancelot before more harm comes to him. We must return to the church." But just as Father Brown reached for his coat, a chilling thought surfaced. What if the confidant was standing right there among them, wearing a familiar face? As the thunder rumbled in the distance, the flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows, and he realized with dawning horror that they were no closer to the truth of who had betrayed Lancelot, nor to unveiling the shadow looming ever closer. A sudden clap of thunder echoed as if to punctuate the urgency of their plight, leaving an unsettling silence in the room. The clock above them ticked on, an incessant reminder that time was running out as darkness gathered around Kembleford. The mysteries were far from resolved, and as Father Brown cast one last glance at the hidden box, he dreaded what the next revelation would unveil. Chapter 9. The Final Setup. The damp chill of the morning mist clung to the village of Kembleford, like an uninvited guest, creeping into every crevice of the ancient stone cottages and curling sinisterly among the twisted limbs of gnarled trees. For Father Brown, the familiar route to St. Mary's Church felt unsettling as he walked between the gravestones, each name a silent witness to history untold. Today held no promise of mere ritual. An icy certainty, nestled in the marrow of his bones, warned him that the truth was stirring, restless, and yearning to be unearthed. He paused beside the time-worn gravestone of Lady Agatha Minton, her etched features softened by moss. Just yesterday, she had been the victim of a ghastly murder, her life extinguished in a manner that shook the very foundations of Kembleford. A shiver ran through Father Brown. He had already deduced that her death was all but a prelude. Something darker lingered beneath the surface of their sleepy village. His thoughts raced, intertwining with the grip of the mist around him, a final act poised to unfold. As he ambled past, a shuffling figure caught his eye. It was Mrs. Kinsley, the housekeeper, with dark, shadowed eyes and tremulous hands. Today, her demeanor felt particularly frantic, as though she were balancing on the edge of something precarious. "Father Brown," she whispered, glancing around as if ensuring no ears were privy to her words. "You must come with me. It's about the lady." With an urgency, piqued by her tone, he followed her through the damp graveyard, footsteps resonating softly against the cobblestones until they reached the Minton estate, a sprawling manor draped in an uneasy quiet. As they entered the austere hall, its timber framing creaked like the tethered memory of long-held secrets. "The drawing room," she rasped, and he trailed behind her, mind actively piecing together the conundrum that had tethered the villagers in suffocating fear. Lady Minton had often hosted gatherings of the eminent and peculiar, but the atmosphere was heavy, as though the air itself mourned. Inside the elegant room, delicate furniture loomed, draped under grey shrouds, victims to neglect since the tragedy. Mrs. Kinsley's fingers trembled as she reached toward an ornate cabinet, stained by time, but resplendent in its craftsmanship. "I found this. Perhaps it might help you understand," she said, pulling open the door to unveil a collection of glistening objects. Father Brown's gaze sharpened as she revealed a slim silver bracelet adorned with an intricate engraving, the initials G.M. The initials of Gerald Minton, the lady's estranged husband, now stood accused of her death. It seemed too blatant a clue, offering its truth so readily. Yet, instinctively, Father Brown sensed layers unexplored. To place blame too easily would be to betray the ghosts lurking amongst the shadows. "I had to hide it. Gerald has been behaving strangely since the funeral. It was as though he knew." Her voice cracked under the weight of her revelation. "Yes, and perhaps he did," Father Brown interrupted gently, weighing her words against the broader narrative they spun. "But there's more to this than mere accusations. What was your relationship with the late lady?" Mrs. Kinsley sunk into a chair, the reality of her connections unfurling before her. "I served Lady Minton for nearly 30 years. I took an oath to care for her. I saw her through her delusions, her secrets. But there were moments, Father, when I feared for her safety. She was convinced someone wanted her dead." Suspicion roiled in Father Brown's gut. The housekeeper was protecting more than just a sense of loyalty. "Do you believe it was Gerald?" Her reaction burst forth, a sharp laugh devoid of humor. "He's not the only one. Lady Minton had enemies, Father. The widow's dry humor had left her with more than mere social debts." There was a hint of bitterness in her tone. "Some called her friend, but they quickly abandoned her for fear of the web she spun." He glimpsed her anguish, mingled with resentment, a turmoil wrapped in a veil of duty. "A web indeed," he murmured, feeling the nature of every conversation twist. Lady Minton's enigmatic nature had birthed suspicion, and now the echoes of feigned friendships set a stage for treachery. If she feared others, we must know who they are. But before he could press for more, a sharp hammering sounded from the door. Mrs. Kinsley jumped, her hands flying to her throat. "What fresh horror now?" she gasped. "Stay here," Father Brown instructed, moving cautiously toward the heavy door. His hand tightened around the latch as he drew the door open to reveal a stormy-eyed Gerald Minton, his breath heavy with urgency. "Father, I need your assistance," he implored, stepping forward. Before Father Brown could voice his thoughts, Gerald's gaze locked onto the drawing room. "I need to find it. Where is the bracelet?" Father Brown erupted with realization. Gerald's desperation screamed of concealment, not merely loss, a key to the puzzle overlooked by a cloudy perspective. In an instant, the mystery crystallized, a story of twisted love, betrayal, and a dance with the Reaper that Lady Minton had tread without fear. "I suggest you answer truthfully, Mr. Minton," Father Brown said, deliberate in tone, "before the law takes its course." But Gerald's expression morphed from sorrow to cold determination, glinting with defiance. "I'll not let them take me," he hissed, stepping backward into the mist of the world beyond the door. And just like that, he vanished into the fog, leaving Father Brown grappling with pieces falling perilously into place. The final setup began to take form, and with a heaviness of heart, Father Brown leaned back against the door frame, wondering just how entangled Kembleford's finest truly were, their fates swirling together in an elaborate deadly game. Behind him, Mrs. Kinsley watched, silent, a spectre, shadowing the climax yet to unfold. And the truth lingered like a storm on the horizon, waiting for one final lightning strike. Chapter 10. The Hidden Motive. The morning mist clung like a shroud over Kembleford, curling around the edges of the old stone cottages, dampening the vibrant colours of the gardens. A long shadow moved through the thick fog as Father Brown, his brown clerical coat visibly darkening with moisture, hurried towards the village green. Yesterday's tragedy weighed heavily on his heart, but even in his grief, the piquant scent of a mystery lingered in the air. The death of Judith Hartley, her body, discovered in the quiet graveyard behind St. Mary's, had rocked the tranquil village. Whispers of foul play swirled around the quiet community as villagers speculated on who might have had the motive to harm the kind-hearted librarian. Father Brown's kind eyes scrutinized the village square, the laughter of children barely cutting through the atmosphere thick with unease. Suddenly, a cry shattered the stillness. Father Brown turned sharply to see Mr. Sedgwick, the village's elderly gardener, stumble out from behind the church, his thinning hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. "Father, you must come quickly." His voice quaked, urgency propelling his words forth. Father Brown followed, trusting the man's instincts. They arrived at the small vestry, the door ajar. Inside, Miss Clara Wells, a prominent villager known for her sharp tongue and sharper wits, stood over a discarded manuscript, her pale face drained of colour. The dim light caught the words, "The Hellgate," manuscript, penned in Judith's flowing cursive. "I found it here, Father," she gasped, clutching it tightly. Judith's manuscript, Father Brown speculated, eyeing the parchment. But what could she have been hiding? "Not just hiding," Clara replied. "There's something peculiar about it. Words are smudged, like it was altered at the last moment. And this note." She pulled a folded piece of paper from the pages, handing it to Father Brown. His fingers brushed against the note, confirming its parchment-like texture, stained in the corners. The words, scrawled in an elegant yet rushed script, caught his attention. "They think I'm a villain, but I hold the truth. Night will fall soon. Don't let shadows deceive you." "Deceive you," Father Brown murmured, a sharpened realization unsettling his thoughts. This suggests some hidden motive, an intent to expose something or someone. Clara's eyebrows knitted together, her gaze skeptical. "You think Judith intended to reveal something? Who could she be referring to?" Father Brown turned back to the room, each detail now laden with significance. Judith had been digging into Kembleford's past. She had a penchant for secrecy. "We might need to speak with the villagers again, those closest to her," he proposed. The air grew warmer as they stepped back outside, the sun beginning to fight its way through the haze. But as they rounded the church's corner, the unexpected sight of Sergeant Mallard halted them, a grave expression etched on his face. "Father, it's Phillips," he said, breathless. "He's in trouble. Another incident." Father Brown felt his heart quicken. Phillips, the village blacksmith, had always kept to himself, but recently he had become increasingly agitated, falling under a cloud of suspicion with the village's gossip-laden whispers. "What has happened?" It's Judith's things, Mallard stuttered. We found him with her belongings. He was babbling about ghosts, claiming she was trying to communicate with him. Ghosts, Clara scoffed, but Father Brown silenced her with a wave of his hand, his mind racing. Phillips had been particularly distraught over Judith's death. We need to understand what he saw. Show us. As they reached the blacksmith's forge, the hearty clang of metal on metal rang out. Phillips stood amid a scattered collection of Judith's belongings, confusion wrinkling his brow as an assortment of books sat scattered around him, half-torn pages fluttering like disturbed birds. I swear she was here. She told me everything. His face reflected a turbulence that suggested more than mere madness. Everything about what? Father Brown probed gently. About the keeper, Phillips practically hissed, his eyes wide with alarm. The one who keeps secrets of our village, who killed her, and the rest. Father Brown exchanged a knowing glance with Clara, who appeared incredulous. The keeper? Surely you don't believe in such tales. Believe? The blacksmith's voice trembled. She told me the truth lies beneath the church, something precious and cursed. That's why, oh God, they think I... Think you what? Father Brown pressed, feeling the threads of a growing tapestry. Before Phillips could respond, someone knocked at the door of the forge. Startled, they turned to see a group of curious villagers peering in cautiously. We heard, one man called out. What's going on? What trouble is Phillips in now? Father Brown stepped towards the door, blocking their view. There is nothing to fear, he said, but his heart raced. We're merely finding clarity in her death. In that fleeting moment, a sharp glint caught the sunlight near the forge's anvil, something half buried in sawdust. Curiosity piqued, Father Brown knelt down to reveal a small locket, opened to reveal a photograph of Judith, alongside a man whose face was partially obscured. A name was barely legible beneath. Edward Hawthorne. Does this mean something to you, Phillips? Father Brown asked urgently, but before Phillips could answer, the silence shuddered under a series of urgent knocks at the door, followed by a piercing scream from the square outside. Father Brown felt the pulse of apprehension surge through him. Stay here, he said, narrowing his eyes at Phillips as he rushed out to join the gathering crowd. The village was unraveling, the buried secrets of Kembleford threatening to break free. What hidden motives breached the surface of their seemingly quiet lives? And, more importantly, who stood poised to reap the consequences? As the echo of another scream reverberated across the village, the question lingered heavily in the air. Would they uncover the truth before it was too late? Chapter 11. The Unexpected Confession. The air was thick with mist as Father Brown made his way through the quiet village of Kembleford, the cobblestone streets glistening under the muted light of the overcast sky. A thin drizzle began to fall, each droplet merging into the pervasive gloom, lending the scene a spectral quality. He had intended to visit Miss Agatha Thistlethwaite in search of a kind word and some of her famous gingerbread. But a commotion outside the old manor drew him instead to where a group of villagers huddled, whispering in low tones. What dreadful news, Father? It was Mrs. Flanagan, her voice quivering with concern. We found her dead at the bottom of the stairs. Her who? Father Brown asked gently, his heart sinking. He turned to see the crumbling facade of the Willoughby Manor looming nearby, shrouded in the swirling mist. It was no stranger to tragedy. Lady Willoughby, Mrs. Flanagan replied, wringing her hands. They say she fell, but I can't believe that, for a moment. The poor dear was terrified of the stairs. Father Brown's mind raced. Lady Eleanor Willoughby was a recluse, often spoken of in whispers and half-truths, her life a tapestry of secrets and buried grievances. The villagers gossiped that her late husband had been a cruel man whose shadow still loomed over the manor. A mere accident seemed inconceivable. "Gather everyone in the drawing-room," Father Brown instructed, his resolve firm. Mrs. Flanagan hurried off, and he followed her, into the manor, the creaking floorboards beneath his feet echoing the quiet disquiet of the village. Inside, the drawing-room was a study in chaos. Chairs were overturned, and in a corner, Lady Willoughby's lifeless form lay shrouded beneath a lace tablecloth, like a ghost, freshly summoned from the ether. In the gathering shadows, Father Brown observed the stricken faces of her remaining staff, each a potential suspect: the stern butler, Mr. Hargrove, the frightened maid, Bella, and the bitter housekeeper, Mrs. Craven. "It cannot be an accident, Father," Mr. Hargrove insisted, his brow furrowed with anxiety. "Lady Willoughby was pushing herself to her limits lately, refusing to heed the doctor's orders." "Is it true she had been speaking with a solicitor?" Father Brown pressed. "Matters of inheritance, or her estate, she wished to discuss." "Yes, but not for us to question," Mrs. Craven snapped. She was far more concerned about her precious legacy than her own life. Father Brown noticed the disdain in her tone, but pressed on. "And what of you, Bella? You were particularly close to her, were you not?" I did look after her," Bella stammered, glancing nervously at Hargrove. "But I was in my quarters at the time, sorting linens. I'd never harm her." "Did anyone visit that evening?" Father Brown's keen gaze swept the room. "Anyone unusual?" Mr. Hargrove hesitated. "Only the vicar." "The vicar? Father Hughes?" A thread of intrigue wove through Father Brown's mind. What would he want with Lady Willoughby? "Preaching on mercy," Mr. Hargrove replied with disdain, but I sensed something more. "Don't underestimate the power of a heart confessional, Hargrove," Father Brown said thoughtfully. "Perhaps it was the vicar who stirred discontent within." "I'd hardly call it unusual for him to be at odds with Lady Willoughby," Mrs. Craven interjected with a sardonic smirk. The woman was a right terror. Father Brown's mind turned. What hidden grievances lay deeper within? As he contemplated, he caught sight of a single sheet of parchment slipping under the tablecloth which covered her form. A letter, its edges slightly curled, as if concealed in haste. Father Brown stepped forward, gently lifting a corner of the cloth. The letter revealed a flowery, elegant script, its edges smeared with the residue of spilled ink. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. The words tumbled out in poetic desperation, a desperate plea mingled with an accusation. "You would dare toy with my affections?" "How lovely," Father Brown murmured, reading aloud to the assembled crowd. "What does this mean? Who penned such a fervent note?" Suddenly, Bella gasped. That's from Gilbert, the young gardener. He was in love with Lady Willoughby, but she spurned him. At least that's what I heard." "Did she indeed?" Father Brown considered, feeling the tendrils of possibility weave around his thoughts. And what might Mr. Gilbert have sought of her? Just then, a figure filled the doorframe. Father Hughes entered, his cheeks flushed and eyes darting nervously. "What is the matter?" His voice trailed off as he noted the atmosphere. Father Brown felt the rapid air fill with unspoken words. "We may have uncovered something more than mere accidents here. You ought not to blame the innocent, Father." The vicar stepped forward, his voice strained. "I merely wanted to provide comfort, not condemnation." "Your timing suggests otherwise," Father Brown countered. Sharpness laced his tongue. "Was it not help you sought, or perhaps your own personal interest?" The villagers gasped, glancing between the men. Tension hung heavy in the air, and suddenly Bella turned pale, a shocking realization dawning upon her. "Father Hughes," she whispered, trembling, "but there's something you need to know about Lady Willoughby's last minutes. She said she'd had enough of secrets and wanted to confess." The clock ticked solemnly, an echo of anxieties resonate within Father Brown's mind. With a glint of understanding, he gripped the lace tablecloth tighter, an urgent realization prickling at the back of his mind. "Where is Gilbert?" he beckoned. "He may hold the key to unraveling this tragic thread." Just then, an ominous crack sounded from the other room. The sharp twang of a bowstring snapped taut, and a chilling voice resonated. "You'll find the truth as deadly as the lies you cling to." Father Brown turned on his heel just as the heavy oak door slammed shut behind him, leaving the room cloaked in dread. The tension was palpable. Every heartbeat seemed to echo with the weight of hidden confessions and lurking truths. What lay behind those threatening words bore no doubt. Time was running out to unearth the layers of deceit surrounding Lady Willoughby's death. Father Brown could feel the coils tightening around Kembleford and its inhabitants, tightening like a noose ready to snap. Desperate to uncover the truth, he breathed, "We must find Gilbert before it's too late." Chapter 12. Justice in Kembleford. The church bells of St. Mary's tolled the witching hour as Father Brown stood over the crumpled figure, draped across the stone floor of the Brown family crypt. The pale light from a single oil lamp flickered, casting long, ominous shadows that danced across the ancient walls. A deep silence reigned, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl echoing through the misty streets of Kembleford. Father Brown hadn't ventured into this tomb-like space willingly. He had received an urgent whisper of trouble from Mrs. Brown, the caretaker and distant relative to the more illustrious, and now unfortunately deceased, Henry Brown. The telltale glint of a tarnished silver ring caught his eye, a relic of the Brown lineage, now forever entwined in the mystery of Henry's abrupt end. Kneeling beside the body, Father Brown noted the empty stare of lifeless grey eyes. "Poor Henry," he murmured softly, his heart heavy. His mind raced back to the events leading up to this moment, the peculiarities surrounding Henry's family. In a village where secrets masqueraded as everyday chatter, whispers had turned to shouts in the wake of Henry's murder. With a keen sense for the human soul's failings, Father Brown knew that each family member had something to hide. Outside, a thick fog rolled through Kembleford, wrapping the manor in a ghostly cloak. The night air was damp and cold enough to chill to the bone, even for a man resolute in faith. The candle flickered as he stood, an inkling of unease settling in him, akin to the fog outside. There was something amiss, much more than a mere murder. As he stepped back into the manor, he heard hushed voices emanating from the drawing room. He listened. The sharp notes of Lady Brown's voice carried through the cracked wooden door. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," she hissed, the timbre straining under the weight of concealed grief. Beside her, Charles Brown, her brother-in-law, spoke in barely a whisper. "You didn't see the look in his eyes, Reginald's eyes. They were dead, long before he laid hands on Henry." Father Brown pushed the door open slowly, its hinges creaking in protest. The elegant room, adorned with faded wallpaper and framed portraits of long-gone ancestors, was cloaked in an air of oppressive tension. Lady Brown stood poised, a porcelain figure of resolved elegance, while Charles slouched in a corner chair, his face shadowed and weary, as if carrying the world upon his shoulders. "Father, you must help us," Lady Brown implored, her eyes gleaming with desperation. "Charles suspects I had a hand in Henry's misfortune." "Please don't be silly, Helen," Charles snapped, his tone betraying irritation. "You only wish to save your fortune. Henry was an oaf, but he was our blood." Father Brown, sensing the flourishes of underlying motives, interjected. "What truth lies beneath your words?" he asked, his gaze penetrating. "The discord between siblings, a mother's protective instincts. It seems that love itself is awash in this tide of suspicion. You think I'm able to hurt him, to hurt any of us?" Helen's voice almost cracked. He brought shame to us all with his frivolous spending and uncanny businesses. I was doing nothing but trying to save our family's legacy when I found out about the bet at the pub, about how he squandered our inheritance. Is that what led to your frantic argument last week?" Father Brown asked, his eyes narrowing. "It's no surprise dead men can't defend themselves. Who else shared your resentment, Lady Brown?" As the mention of the bet slipped from his lips, Charles's face shifted, a storm cloud emerging in his features. "An accident, surely. You think it's absurd to imply—" Before he could finish, a crash echoed from the study. Hearts pounding, they rushed toward the sound, finding the ornate desk overturned and papers scattered like autumn leaves. But it wasn't the mess that seized Father Brown's attention. It was a glimmer, a silver ring, identical to the one missing from Henry's body. "Lord have mercy," Lady Brown gasped, stepping forward. "That's his mother's heirloom." Charles's eyes darkened with confusion. "How did it get here? We all wanted that ring gone, to keep the peace between us." "It suggests there was more to Henry's demise than immaturity or greed," Father Brown whispered, piecing together the fragments of this intricate puzzle. "Each of you had a motive, yet underneath it all lies an even deeper fear. Public scandal. Fear that the Brown family may be stripped of the facade, that those who hold such a ring cannot be tainted." The door creaked open, and in walked Constable Mallory, his face pale. "Father, you must come quickly. There's been another incident. Someone's been found at the graveyard, seemingly connected to Henry." As the unsettling news settled like a weight upon them, Father Brown's mind whirled. Henry's death had plunged into shadows, revealing not just the family's secrets, but the graveyard's silent witnesses. "We must go. And you too, Charles and Helen," he instructed. With the tension thickening like the fog, they began toward the now increasingly sinister graveyard on the manor grounds, where secrets lay buried alongside those who'd worn them in life. The air held a cold kind of anticipation, every step towards the churchyard, resonating with dread. In the eerie glow of flickering lanterns, Father Brown felt the suffocation of hidden truths close in around him. What awaited amongst the headstones would either reveal an unmasking of the true murderer or plunge their fates into further darkness. Now, the missing pieces burgeoned like a swollen tide. Few were innocent in the constellations of human motives, and as the mist deepened, Father Brown sensed that this was only the beginning.